Welcome back. I'm so happy to see everyone and really just so excited that we are headed into our final day together. This has been a really awesome experience for me and for Andrea. I hope for all of you. And again, as I said yesterday in my closing, my one word whip of many words that I'm just really grateful to have this baby that I and we have been birthing for a while now on its feet in other people's hands. And you all did just a beautiful job yesterday with the material. So we're really excited about that. We have a bit of shift in schedule today, nothing too dramatic, but we do have, we are not going to be joined by Akron today. And so that changes the number of teach back groups. So what we're going to do is the first group today, group 4, which is now only the Strom JCC, is going to go first for everyone. We'll just stay all together. Then the group 5, whoever's group 5, which I don't remember at the moment, we will split up just for time and we'll go into the separate breakout rooms. And then we're going to come back together again for 6 because Emmet and Yael from JCC Association and Emmet, our program and communications manager at Talmud, are going to present back to the whole group and do their section for the whole group also. So we'll be apart for a shorter amount of time. And then the rest of the day will go how we planned, some facilitator boot camp and other fun things. Thank you to our volunteers who are going to play a little bit with facilitation challenges later. So before we get started on our work today, we have a visitor. So I want to welcome Sue Gelsey from JCC Association, who's going to say hi for a minute.
I'm going to take my mask off. Hi, I'm actually for a moment in the office with Joy. I had a little login issue, so I thought I'll just find an office to join the call on. So thanks so much, Nicole. Thanks for giving me a minute to greet you all. And I was so happy to see, as people were joining, see so many familiar faces, and so excited that you all, on behalf of your agencies, have leaned into this program and this opportunity. When we think about talent development in the field, there's truly nothing more important than the culture. It's the foundation of everything that we want to be focused on and that you could be doing on behalf of your agency. So I really, when I had spoken to Joy about this, I literally wanted 1 minute to say thank you for leaning into this and being a leader for your community and being a leader for the field as we look to advance the culture of JCCs locally and continentally. So thank you very much. I look forward to the day that we can gather in person and share what we've learned here with the wider field. Thank you. So, back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Enjoy her office back. And
yes.
You can name us again.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you,
you too.
Across the country.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So we're not going to have a formal icebreaker today. We'd like to just take the time to land. We'll do our one word whip to sort of settle into how we're all showing up today in a moment in the chat, and then just leave some open space for our first part of the morning to check in with anything that's percolating or burning for anyone. So if you would go ahead and put into the chat your one word for this morning, that would be awesome. I will share my voice to read out to the room. Cold, ready, tired, stage fright, we got you. Open, focused, ready, frazzled, commuted, sunny, bittersweet, distracted, but I'll be ready, nervous, ready, set, go, warm, present, listening, thoughtful, happy, frazzles, unfocused, waking up, caffeinated. I know that feeling. Did we get everyone? Awesome. So again, always think curious and excited. Always important, I think, and meaningful to see that we can come into a space on any given day, just like in our JCCs and our families in different places and similar places, and grateful to have your chat voices in the room to get us started today. So really, this is a little bit of time and space for you. Any questions that have come up, thoughts you want to share, a reflection that's come to you that you feel like, felt important, anything burning? This is space for you. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Well, what's interesting for me is what's been coming up at work, where I was thinking, what did I do before I was in this seminar? And now I kind of know what I need to do, at least the first step, and take it from there. But yeah, so it's improving what I do at work and thinking more about the culture. And this has been really great. I've been really enjoying it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rena.
This morning I had a conversation with a coworker who was telling me about someone who's been calling out a lot lately, and it's been like consistent, like every week they've been calling out to, and I'm like, oh, interesting. Like we talked about this in one of our trainings, and who would be responsible for checking in and making sure that maybe they're not sick, and maybe it's something that, they're feeling uncomfortable in their environment, and who is responsible for reaching out. And so that was like, I even said on the call, I'm like, oh, this is something I learned in my training.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rena.
That kind of sharing is like the music to our ears. Thank you for sharing that with us. Quiet group. This is a no pressure situation. This is just a moment for reflections or any burning questions. I feel like if there was a burning question, we might have heard it already, but I'm encouraging you anyway. Just sit with the space for another minute, and if something comes up, great. And if not, we'll move into our first teach back.
Nicole, you know what? Rena's question kind of got me thinking about something, or comment. We've had a similar issue where we're getting a lot of call outs, and the question is, how do we go about resetting that culture? Because it seems like people are taking it, like really taking advantage. And I know there are issues going on, and we do understand that there's a lot of stress. But how do we reset that?
I have a thought, and I'm also curious to hear your colleagues, right, who are presumably also in similar positions, right? What's happening at your JCC? I mean, if you've been paying, I've been listening to the news and reading the paper, right? There's a moment that we're all in, right, where people are rethinking as we move back. Like some of you have been in person in some limited capacity throughout, right? But many of your workers are, kind of moving back into that in-person space. And I always think naming what's in the room is a good place to start. It can be really scary and hard, but noticing it and getting curious instead of like there's been but like we notice that there's been an increase in the amount of people calling out, and we want to bring some curiosity to like what is that about, and what can we do as an organization, as an institution, as your supervisors, to kind of meet needs that, right, like to kind of, right, so that's my suggestion, right, to like name it in appropriate ways and like the appropriate breaking out of staff or whatever, but to name it and get curious. So it's not a calling out, it's a curiosity, like, we're wondering, we noticed this.
Right. And I think exactly. And it sort of speaks to, I think Rena was asking the questions that you can be asking, which is, whose responsibility, and how do we address it? But, knowing that when we have, and I think that the reality that we are in this moment where this is happening on a wide scale. It's not, we know that work is taking on a new and different meaning for people. But at the same time, what is that about before? Is it that there's a culture that's happening, or is it that people are in need? I basically just repeated what Andrea said, so I'm gonna stop talking.
So
I think
Dana, and I saw Dana
Yeah.
and Monica both had their hands raised. So go ahead, Dana, and then Monica.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this, and yesterday when we did the, I think it was yesterday, don't quote me, but when we did the exercise with the supervisor and the staff and then the observer, I was the supervisor, and the difficult part for me, I was kind of struggling, was I didn't have a relationship with that person. So I think a lot of what you've talked about in this training in terms of building the foundation of connection, listening, empathy, can be really helpful, because then it's just a normal part of your routine in terms of, seeing where people are at. And it's not awkward when you say, hey, I've noticed you've been out a few days, is everything okay? So.
Joy, did you want to say something?
What?
Sorry, Andrea.
That's okay. Can we let Monica go, and then Joy, and then Denise also has her hand up.
Go ahead, Monica.
Thanks. So I'll echo what Dana said, but what Donna said, but I think part of what we've been talking about in here is those daily check-ins, and recognizing that even if, like, we've been back since June, the work has steadily become more and more. It is different than it was prior to the pandemic, but it is getting busier, and there's lots of new things, and there's constant change. And oh, now we're opening this, and now we're doing that. And so really recognizing the differences in our work, understanding that we also had this lull for so long. So going from 0 to 60 is a lot, and understanding who individuals are. We have some people that are very outward people, and others that are in outward positions that need to be able to refuel and recharge. And so a big thing that we do is those constant check-ins with our staff. And if we see someone, we actually tell them that they have to take a day off or take a shift off or step away before it gets overwhelming and unbearing that they are having those call outs. So I think those check-ins, and really, again, naming it, like, yes, this is different, and this isn't the job that you started in June. It's evolved into this, and we are all in the same boat of struggling and trying to find that balance, and having that humility that I don't have the answers, but let's work on this together.
I think, first of all, just naming that humility, I don't have the answers, but let's work on this together. I mean, that's one of the best leadership, that's a critical leadership skill, right? Anyway, and also just to say that the work is changed, but people are changed, right? We are all forever changed by what has happened in the last 20 months, and it's not fully over. And I think remembering that too, like, so it's not at all out of the scope that a person who performed, for lack of a better word, this way at work pre-pandemic is now it's different because priorities have shifted, because mental health is now an issue, or, whatever it is really critical. Thank you, Monica. Joy.
I get a blog post every morning, and it's like the thought of the day. And I think it's very interesting. It comes from Paul Wieselman, and today's actually says, when solving problems, dig at the root instead of hacking at the leaves. And if we think about how we're changing our culture in our communities, we really have to take a look at the big picture of our JCCs and really dig at the roots. And this is just the start. We've laid the foundation here with this training with the amazing Nicole and Andrea. And now we're going to help you build so that we can dig at the roots and start to make those changes.
So let's, Denise, I know you had a comment, and also want to invite people to look at what's in the chat. So please, Denise.
This isn't necessarily a direct answer, but this is something we did. We were actually hardly even closed during the pandemic because we had a pandemic childcare going on, and mobile meals throughout it. And so we've been going through this, I think, earlier, people coming back, because obviously. So one thing we did that was really, really helpful is we're a functional federation. And so one of our agencies is Jewish Family and Children's Services. And so I had the director come over, and we basically formed kind of an alliance and a collaboration where staff, he basically talked about their services. And I guess what I'm getting at and what Nicole said is mental health is a huge part of this. We basically, I brought him in to say what they do at JFCS, and he offered their services, and we basically have those services open to our staff. And I will tell you that we have a lot of staff using it. And I think it is a really good idea for every single JCC to do the exact same thing, because I think a lot of it is stemming from mental health because of what we've all gone through for the last year and a half.
Thank you, Nicole. Denise, yes, many of you have kind of been bringing that out. And I have seen a number of nonprofit agencies of different sizes either provide a direct service like that, or provide like resource that people can use to and connect to another mental health service provider, and then offer their folks, develop a relationship. Sorry, my words are not, and my brain is not in sync right now.
And there's funding happening in the world around this too. There's funding all over the place for Jewish professional staff specifically.
So on a point that Rebecca has put a book recommendation, and I want to just name it, like, it's beautiful what's happening right now, right? I'm excited for all of you to get to have each other for the next several months together, to continue sharing resources and experiences and all of that. It's really powerful, and that is the power of community and cohort learning, and the power and culture that you can also then with each other think about which are the pieces and how do we bring this back to our own institution. So with that, if you have a question that we haven't gotten to, I invite you to put it in the chat. We already have one that we're going from Lori that we're going to add to the bike rack for later. With that, where we're going to go from here is we're going to spend around another 15, 20 minutes debriefing the feedback, the teach back experience, and things, kind of high level things that we noticed, or we want to give you feedback around across the groups. And then we will do our facilitator boot camp. And then we'll take a short break, and we will then have about 50 minutes for what does it look like to bring this back to your JCCs, and give you some time for some action planning and questions. So I'm going to hand things over to Nicole.
Okay, I just wanted to offer, Andrea, let me confirm that we're on the same page. So I had a couple of high level things that came up about facilitation generally that I wanted to offer, and then we're sort of opening to just debrief conversation, right? Okay. See, we're on it. All right. So just a couple of things that came up sort of repeatedly that I wanted to make sure that I named. The first, and I think most imperative for everybody to just really hear again, and really I want to drill down on a little bit, is that we have very intentionally written this manual to be so scaffolded that if you wanted to pick it up and read it verbatim, it would have everything you needed to deliver this training. The intention is not that you will do that, nor that that is necessary. And in fact, as somebody spoke about in my last small group, reading from something is not the ideal facilitation style anyway, but that you should feel really empowered to, as Andrea talked before about the material will be in you, as you study it, as you talk about it in your team, as you deliver it more than once, you'll embody it, it will be integrated. If you think about anything that you teach, or even think about something in your life that you just you talk about a lot, right? I talk about interpersonal dynamics a lot in my professional, my personal life. There are just so many things about it. Or if you're an ECC professional, I know we have a few of those on the call, right? And like, there are just things about early childhood that are just in you. You can trust that as you work with this material, it will just be in you and you will rely on the manual less. But I want to just be very, very clear about our intention, which is that the manual is written to be hyper scaffolded, not because we expect people to use it that way, but so that it's there to support the person who is the least comfortable with facilitating and with the content material. And to that end, again, we really do want you to feel empowered to make it your own in ways that don't, with the lens of maintaining the intellectual property and the integrity of the material, that to bring things in that, are about who you are as a facilitator or something. Like in our breakout, the San Diego JCC brought their values, brought a slide of their values that are their values that are, I'm assuming, probably posted around the JCC and something that the JCC community is familiar with. That was a great way to bring in your own, to make it your own for your specific community. Just as an example, because we just did it, they also brought a movie clip that was really appropriate and fun. So again, making it your own without changing the materials dramatically or eliminating anything is, we really welcome you to that, but knowing that you have some flexibility, and you also can know that we don't expect you to say the words that are written in here exactly the way they're written.
So can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Another way, and this has come up a little bit, but neither Nicole nor I have named it explicitly, to make it your own, is with the scenarios, right? You don't want to choose a scenario that's too close to home, because that can backfire in very interesting ways. Or maybe you do. But we gave you scenarios. Some of them are like in a congregation setting. It's pretty easy to tweak that scenario and make it about an interaction in a JCC. So we invite you to take the scenarios and revise and edit them so that they resonate with the experience of people working in a JCC situation.
And one of my groups did that yesterday, actually, which was great. So, and the only thing we would ask is that if you have a great scenario that you think would be great for other people to use, please, and you're willing to share it, please send it to us and we'll put it into the files where our other trainers can get materials, and we'll just credit you, just send something that has a credit with your name and the JCC name. Okay, I also want to talk a little bit about the Jewish content and Hebrew words and Jewish references. So I wrote most of the Jewish content. I actually think I wrote all the Jewish content, but definitely most of it. And as a Jewish educator for 20 years, I had to constantly catch myself saying, in our tradition, as Jews, we know, right, in our history, there was a point at which I actually had to go through the whole manual and edit for tons of that stuff. It's really, it's really a skill for some of us to shift out of the mindset of we're talking in a Jewish education context with Jewish content to thinking of it, as I said the other day, about like Judaism 101. We would much rather that you over explain something to a room full of people who already know it than that one person in that room feels alienated because you said a Hebrew word that they don't know, or you said in our tradition and they're the one person who's doesn't identify Jewishly in the room. So just really, really important to start and you might start by picking a certain highlighter color that reminds you of that and go over the manual with it one time, something like that. But just really important to shift so that if a Hebrew word comes out of your mouth, it is immediately followed by the English translation. If you mention something that's a Jewish reference, it is immediately followed by a bit of contextualization. And I mean, even like the word Torah, you'll see in the text, every time it says Torah, it says in the Hebrew Bible or in the Old Testament, like it explains what we're talking about. So I just want to, and inevitably with every trainer that we've ever worked with, because most of the people in our training world come from some kind of Jewish background or Jewish professional context, this can be a bit of a lift, but I just want to really like drive it home that it's super critical because it's about inclusion. I'm done.
Okay. There, I love Joy's attention to detail. So there's a slide number 23 in the deck. It's asking about power dynamics, and it says in your organization, and that's because our trainers are usually external. So feel free, that's another thing, like to feel free to go in and be like, oh, actually, I'm speaking to everybody in my own organization. So I'm going to change that to our organization. And we invite you to, like, just give it a read through. I want to
Hey, Andrea, on that particular note, when we're talking about empathy and recognizing that as leaders within our organizations and the facilitators of this training, is we have pre-existing relationships and understandings of the staff and what they're likely bringing in the room based on how they've brought their stuff in other contexts in other ways. So, and you know what that person's going to say, and you know how they're going to say it for the most part. And being sort of open and understanding about sort of how it is that they're showing up. So it's a long-winded intro to the question of outside facilitator versus ourselves doing the work and thoughts, reflections.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, excuse me, I appreciate that intro because you're naming something. So I'm going to answer the question, and I'm sure Nicole has some thoughts too, but I'm going to answer that question in two ways, having been in both positions. That, as you named so clearly, like when most of you are in some level of senior supervisor position. And so when you come into that training, you know your staff, right? There are things that you, as Miriam said, like, oh, I know how this person is going to react. So it's a facilitator challenge when you're doing this with in-house to like be in a curious mindset, right? Like to kind of notice, like, this is how I'm pretty sure this person is going to react. And then another way of thinking about this is, okay, how can I use that reaction perhaps to further the teaching? Never when it's going to put someone on the spot or make them feel ashamed or whatever, but is there a way that I can notice what might be coming up in the room that would further the conversation that we're trying to have? So that's one. The other is, can I stay curious? Like maybe this person isn't going to show up in that way. And what's the information that I might learn about what this person needs based on how they show up? Right. So those are three things. In terms of internal versus external, there are benefits and challenges to both. I think by naming, right, as being all in positions where you are supervising or you're fairly senior in the organization, running a session for the non-supervisory employees can feel a little tricky, right, for them. And so, again, one way of dealing with that is to name it. Like when you're teaching the power thing, to say like, I'm going to name that, like, there's a power differential between me and most of the people being trained in this room. And I'm going to pay attention to that and acknowledge that that might impact your willingness to be open, and that's okay. Right? To kind of name it, acknowledge it. Also, when you put people into breakout rooms, when you're training both internally or externally, right? The advantage of training, being an internal trainer, is that like, the groups, right? You know how to put people together, hopefully, or someone on your staff can help you with that, right? And those can be the spaces where people are really diving in, and then share back. You can just ask about the experience and not the content. That's a trick I often use when I'm putting people into small groups and I want them to go deep, or I want them to share potentially vulnerable stuff. They're in a small group intentionally. And so when they come back, I want to ask them about like, so what was it like to look at that issue, or what was it like to talk about this, and not like, what did you discuss? So those are my thoughts. And I turn it over to Nicole and actually anybody in this group, because my guess is you do all kinds of training for your staff. And, you know, this may be a more vulnerable one, but.
I would add that, and we've said this a couple times, and I feel like it can't be said too much, that, you know, engaging in this work, this whole JCulture project that you've, you know, initiative that your JCCs and you as individuals have committed to is a huge, huge step for the organization. And at the same time, it requires scaffolding. I feel like I use that word 10 times a day now, but from the organization. So you want to have had some conversations about, okay, we're gonna dive into this training work. We know, because we saw it while we were even doing the trainer, how much gets kicked up. What are we putting around the conversations that might come up? How are we supporting people with what this might bring up for people, or with questions that they might have, or concerns they might start to bring to us? You should be going into this work expecting to kick up dust. That's what we're trying to do, right? We're actually trying to upset the status quo in some ways. And so it's incumbent on you. And when I say you, not all you are coming to this trainer role in very different positions in your organization. So if you are not the person who's responsible for holding the buy-in of the organization, then maybe one of your next pieces of this work just in the next couple of weeks is to grab the CEO, CFO, head of COO is what I meant to say, head of HR, like executive director. I know everybody has different org structures and sizes. Is there a lay leader that should be involved in knowing that this work is going on and being a champion for it, right? But making sure you're building some real buy-in and scaffolding so that when inevitably stuff comes out of this training, there's a container to hold it.
I'm curious, and I don't know how to find the answer. How many of you think you will be doing this 100% in person, or if you will have in person and people on computers? Maybe you can put it in the chat if you're, I know times are changing. So if you're not doing it until February, I see a lot of people saying hybrids.
Well,
yeah.
Thanks for asking that
a
question.
lot of hybrid.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that question, because it then brings to mind like, okay, right. So yeah, you've all had a chance to learn how to deliver this over Zoom, and to think about if it's hybrid, what does that look like? Does that look like some of it is all in person and some of it is all over Zoom? Or are you thinking like some people might participate via Zoom? Because I think I want to raise that, like, if it's one person in a room where there's a big or two people who are on their own devices somewhere else, and everybody else is in the room together, but you've got a big screen so that the people on the Zoom can participate. Awesome.
Well, our Matt just brought up like, and a piece where it's like, there may be some constituencies of the staff who are just more realistic on Zoom, and they're going to do it, it could be, and we're here. I'm going to move us on to facilitation stuff. And we're here to help you think, again, like we're going to say this again later, but we're here to help you think through the delivery pieces. We being all 5 of us, 6 of us, whoever's on here that's a staff person for JCC Association and TEM Mode. Okay, so we're going to dive into some facilitation play. So what we're going to do is the facilitator. Oh, I have to look at my notes. So we basically have teams. They don't know their teams, but the facilitator.
So I'm going to jump in while you're looking for.
I got it. What were you going to say? Where are you? I lost you. Oh, hi. What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Okay. So the facilitator is actually going to be you're paired with your challenger already, because it's based on the content that you're going to deliver. So I know you all got an email earlier just telling you what you were gonna do. And basically it's gonna go like this. The first team is gonna be Molly and Tara. Molly's gonna deliver a little bit of the respectful cues part of the psychological safety section. Where's Molly? Can you wave at me? Hi, thank you. And Tara is gonna challenge her with some stuff that Molly doesn't know what it is yet. Okay, so Tara is gonna get to, Molly's gonna get to, and if you're the disruptor, you know, be gentle. We don't want to make it so too hard. We want to try to practice, you know, how we manage challenges and facilitation. And Molly, you know, feel free to get stuck because we're going to step in and talk about like what are some ways that we could deal with this situation. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Molly and Tara, you ready?
Tara, where are you? I'm looking for
Tara,
you. So I can see you.
Tara, wave.
There she is. Okay.
Okay. And just, you know, just give Molly a minute or two to deliver some stuff and then you can jump in.
Okay. The fact that so many people understand the question of cues in the same way tells us something important. We know what being respectful looks like and how to demonstrate respect for others. The question is whether or not we choose to do so. So we know what respect means, we know what it looks like, but we have a choice. Are we going to perform it? Often we pay too much attention to the cues we do or do not receive, yet we get lazy or cynical about giving those cues to those around us. And we argue that it's silly to greet a coworker daily or that it isn't our job to demonstrate interest in someone by asking about their weekend. Has anyone else heard that around the workplace? But
I'm sorry, can I
Tara,
interrupt
yeah.
for just a second? I don't want to sound negative, but it kind of seems like, isn't this all just like politeness and like political correct nonsense?
Could you expand on that a little bit? I want to unpack that because I'm not entirely sure what you mean.
I mean, you're talking about these, sorry, you're talking about these cues and like, we want to keep it psychologically safe, but I mean, at what point are we like, okay, that's enough? Like, it seems like at some point it's just, we have to tiptoe around people.
Do you feel like you've reached that point?
I mean, I'm not saying me necessarily, but yeah, sometimes it's like, when is enough enough? Like, I'm fine with being respectful to my coworkers, but sometimes it just seems like, I don't know. It just seems like we always have to like tiptoe around people and just be politically correct all the time.
Okay. First, I want to thank you for bringing this up because if there's ever a forum that's the right place to ask these questions, this is it. And I know sometimes it can be hard to step forward and express a concern. So I really want to thank you for showing up that way. That's what makes this worth it. Could you, you had said like that there's a point at which you feel like enough is enough and that you feel like there's a transition from respect into something else. Could you give me an example of a moment that you felt like that or saw that so far today, maybe even?
I don't know. Even when we're going through all of this and like, oh, you have to be like, oh, thank you. Even what you just said, like, you're bringing this to me. Like, I don't know. It just seems disingenuous sometimes. Like we're trying so hard to be polite to people that we just can't even be ourselves anymore.
Okay. I have to tell you the disingenuity cuts deep for me. That's rough. So I apologize for coming across that way to you and that being how you received it. I think that it's really useful to talk about that line and we want to be able to create a space in which you don't feel like you're being careful. We want to create a space in which you feel like you can be brave. And that's the difference that I'm trying to outline, especially with this moment, the small cues. Do you feel like you see a difference between those two things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you. Oh my gosh, such a good job. Mommy, that was so hard. And Tara, we love you, Tara. Nobody's upset with you. That was great. That was great. So does anybody just want to jump in and say what you thought just worked really well? Okay, I'm going to say Monica said it in the chat. You don't have to be careful. We were trying to create a space where you don't have to be careful. You can be brave. OMG. So yeah, that was beautiful. Right there with you, Monica. What else? Anybody else want to, you can just unmute just to share what went well.
When Molly just right at the beginning sort of asked her to unpack it a little bit, she was very curious right from the beginning, right?
Yep, spot on.
To explain exactly what she was talking about. I think it would help her feel more heard.
And that's a critical tactic if somebody brings you something that is at all pushbacky or triggery, or to ask, it's to ask them to bring you more so you do genuinely understand it better. It's also a little bit of a like buffer for you, so you can like take a breath and be like, did they just say that? And kind of like get into a little bit of a different space with it.
I think too, the curiosity was just Molly that you had was kind of like, it just broke down, I'm sure. The defense is not sure exactly, Tara, but for me, as I was listening to it, and also got away from like Miriam had that concern about somebody always showing up in some way. And then your curiosity is like, you know what I mean? But you didn't just expect her obviously to be, I mean, you knew that she was going to have some issues, but you remained curious and, you know, in a way like respectfully confrontational so she could explore that for herself. So I think it was pretty genius.
Emmett shared in the chat, I loved how you asked for specific and concrete examples, which I also would lift up as like, if you're going to tell me you don't like something, then let's be clear about it. Getting feedback, which means everybody mute for a second. Okay, I see Molly's hand and then Miriam Pedler.
I saw Joy's question, and I just wanted to say that where I was going with that was I was going to ask her to let me know when we got to a point where she felt like that division was happening and to call my attention to it so we could address it then. And that was how I was going to hopefully get back on track with to not let the interception continue.
Right. So I also saw Joy's question. I'm just going to read it just so people don't have to go looking for it. Curious how long you would let this go on with one distractor and what would be the merge back into the training. And so I think one piece that's just sort of not specific to this direct interaction, but in general is, you know, that's a facilitation skill to manage. And if somebody, and this was mild, right? But if somebody is truly derailing, then we take a point at which we can say, like, I really hear that this is very important to you and validate it. We have content that we really need to work with, and I'm happy to speak with you at a break or speak with you after the training to follow up further on it. Allie.
I just want to tell Tara, like, great actress. And like, also, I mean, I noticed, and I think everyone else also, like, Nicole was very, like, you emote a lot. And so it was easy to,
I know.
to see, but I found that, like, I'm a person who speaks with my hands. So when I saw Tara's like first thing was like this, I was like, oh, hey there. But like, I do think that you like did a really great job of being in that role, and I know it can sometimes be uncomfortable. So great job, Tara.
Miriam, did you want to say something?
I wanted to compliment Molly on bringing her whole genuine self to the table. I know how hard that can be, and it really came through. You brought, like, you yourself you were a human being with Tara, and you stopped yourself from feeling your own feelings and worked on feeling her feelings with her. And I just am very glad that I get to work with you all the time. So great job.
Andrea, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to point out and you've named it in a couple of different ways, but not exactly like that. Every time Molly responded, it was an invitation that went back to Tara, right? So it wasn't right. Because it's clear sometimes like they're not actually looking for an answer, right? I think that was something that Molly sussed out. Tara wasn't looking for an answer because it was about how they were feeling. And the way that Molly kept putting it back created the space to recognize, oh, this is not, because often when we're being interrupted in that way, sometimes people are asking for clarification, but often it's because something in the training is hitting them in a way that is bringing up emotion because they either don't agree with it or they've been having experiences and they feel shut down by them. And this is a place, as you named, Molly, right? This is the place where we get to have that. I would just speak to, yeah, that's it, because Nicole already spoke to the timing issue. I will say as a facilitator, that's continues to be one of my biggest challenges, is like recognizing that like I want to be able to answer every question. I want to be able to call on every person, and it can be so uncomfortable to say like, I see you have your hand raised. Can you put it in the chat or can you write it down? And I will be happy to come back to it, or to cut someone off who is really not letting go for whatever reasons. So well done.
Great job, super great job. Okay, so next up we're going to have Natalie facilitate, and Miriam P is going to participate. Whenever you're ready.
Awesome. I'm trying to find, oh, I see. Sorry. I see you, Miriam. Thank you. All right, friends, we are going to start back up on continuum of behavior, and all human interactions we can view along this continuum. So we have respect, disrespect, unkind, rude, all across the spectrum here. Who remembers from earlier in the session what kind of behavior is unlawful? You can go ahead and put that in the chat or just unmute.
Protected classes.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
Protected classes.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Perfect. Protected classes. Yes. That is one of the unlawful kinds of harassment. So moving right along, in order to better understand the impact of rudeness in the workplace, I want to conduct a brief experimental exercise. So I want you to take a deep breath. And I want you to think of a time from your past when you were treated rudely, and return to that time and that place. Relive that experience and really visualize yourself in that moment.
I don't mean to like get distracted, but I'm just really having a hard time with connecting direct communication as bullying.
Okay.
I feel like if you have an employee who's completely incompetent, you have to be direct. They're not going to understand. How is that bullying?
I hear you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Can you elaborate just a little more? Is there anything specific that you could bring to the table in regards to that?
If I have an employee who is just they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm really clear about my expectations. I have them listed clearly. I have presented them with their job description. I am now saying to them very clearly and very directly, you are not doing your job. You are not meeting expectations. How does that make me a bully?
I hear you, and I could understand from your point of view why you would think that you're setting down the expectations and making it clear. I want to invite you to kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes and kind of think about where they're coming from. It may not be that they are, it may not be that they're not doing their job because it's not part of your expectations. It may be something going on at home. It may be something they're bringing into work. So if I could invite you to put yourself in their shoes, just to kind of think about what kind of baggage they're bringing in.
I feel like we kind of have to leave our, our personal baggage at the door. Those are the expectations of the job. We have to we're grown-ups here. We have to come to work. We've got to put our smile on our faces, and we've got to leave it all behind. And if you can't, then you're just not, maybe this isn't the place for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been in a lot of situations where I've also been told that, and it's kind of like in our bones and ingrained in that way. And, I want to invite you just to be open and try something different. So I'm happy you brought that. And, I'm happy to talk more about this offline as well. And I'm glad you brought this to your space, but I do want to bring us back to the material. So happy to talk with you about this in the break.
Great. Well done. We're going to.
I'm so sorry.
Right. Thank you to our volunteers, to Natalie and to Miriam. Let's point out, like, what did we notice in how Natalie was holding the space. And Natalie, you also feel free to name what you noticed for yourself. But what are we noticing in how she was handling it? Jamie.
Natalie, great job. And one of the words that I just took notes on was that you said, I want to invite you to put yourself in their shoes. And I really liked that, because it was a kind of a shift from looking at it from your standpoint and giving an opportunity to recognize in an empathetic way. And that was really great. And that was hard. So really great job, both of you, because Miriam, that was tough. You both did such a great job.
Yeah, Rebecca put in the chat, I love how we can all just step into these roles because we've all experienced these coworkers. Yeah, I think that's true. Thank you. Other folks, what did you notice? What do you want to lift up about this interaction?
I think that the thing that Miriam said about, because I think we've all heard this before, you got to leave your baggage at the door. And I think that's one of those statements that we all hear. And so the way that Natalie approached that and coming with some empathy and saying, I've been there, I've heard that statement before, and I'm encouraging you to think differently and take a different approach. And that was helpful.
Yeah. Thanks. Other noticing. I see Mallory and then somebody else, I think, unmuted. Go ahead, Mallory.
Yeah, I'll just say, kind of echoing Rena, that's an opportunity to give someone a paradigm shift, right? You've been told all along, come to work hard, leave your stuff at the door. Maybe that's not how it should be. Maybe this is a time to rethink how you approach that.
Beautiful, thanks. Molly.
I found this example to be really helpful, and the way that Miriam Pedler executed it. I have been struggling with thinking about how one being triggered by the content might show up. And this was such a great example of that, because there was no moment in the content that specifically pointed at her and said, you've been doing this thing and we're going to hold you accountable for it. She did that all internally, and then just sort of pushed it out onto everybody else. And that was a really helpful example for me.
Great, thanks, Molly, and thanks, Miriam. Other things, anything else? There's some stuff in the chat agreement about Natalie staying relaxed and grounded, and folks saying that they loved your invitation for them to step into the supervisor's shoes. So anything else we want to share with them?
One thing, just self-reflection. is I realize now I could have brought this back to the text. And what we've learned already is that our employees are more efficient. One, if they're like in a space where they feel is empathetic and psychologically safe. So I should have brought that back to our text in thinking that instead of leaving your baggage at the door, I'm inviting you to go back to what we just learned about and how productive your workplace can be. So.
Yeah, so I love that. And I'm just going to invite us all to let go of shoulds, right? That like, we're all learning, we're all expanding and noticing. So wonderful noticing that there's material in the text that can help you. And sometimes it's not right there. Go ahead, Nicole.
Right, but and when you're facilitating a whole piece, whole piece of content, it'll be more readily available to draw on than when, you just literally picked up the manual to read a piece of it for this. Yeah.
Anyone? Your hand go up.
Natalie, some of your language was so like psychologically cueing for me to be like, you kept smiling at me. And so I kept smiling back at you. And you kept like, I'm inviting you. And you were with, and I was like, okay, sure. Like, I'm like, wait, I'm not supposed to like go with you. I'm supposed to be like, no. But you were giving me all these psychological cues. And it's a really good piece of advice also, that what you're physically bringing in, I think we talked about that also, Emmett. I think you suggested that we bring our body language into it, but that was so helpful that like I almost fell for it. So nicely done. Thank you.
Yeah, great noticing, Miriam, and great lifting up, right? Our people are paying, particularly when we're in person, but even on Zoom, people are, even if they're not conscious of it, they are picking up on the cues that we are sending, and a lot of them are not verbal. And so that's an awareness. And it sounds, Miriam, like part of what also happened is that like her inviting the cues that she was giving you, that invitation shifted your move, right? Shifted your, and so that's another important, as you were naming it, right? It's an important noticing. Like if I respond to someone's hostility with openness and a lack of defensiveness and a kind of like, yes, let's have this conversation, it often, not always, but it often helps them shift. It takes a little bit of the bite away. Not always, but often. We have one more pair, yes?
Yes, we have one more pair. It is Rena and Jamie. Hit it.
Who is supposed to be the facilitator and who's supposed to be the interrupter?
Oh, you're the facilitator.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Jamie,
So we talked about the unlawful harassment and rudeness, and now we're going to move into bystander and what you do when you see something that is clearly unfair, unjust, and just rubs you the wrong way. So when we show up present at work, Hineni, we have the best chance to become an active bystander, a person who intervenes. And when we witness a situation or repeating pattern that we know should be addressed, the Jewish directive around bystander intervention is very clear. It's reflected in a direct text from the Torah, the Jewish Bible. Do not stand idly by while your neighbor's blood is shed. Hopefully at this point we won't get to bloodshed, but in terms of what that means, it's harm caused to another. So yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm having a moment because I'm recalling a time where I'm having a reaction to this, and I'm trying to take a moment. So I'm so sorry
Totally
to be so
fine.
emotional in this. But I'm like physically having a reaction. I'm like stuck on the fact of this the spectrum that we're on, and deciding if this was a real bullying situation or not, and in a time that I've had. And so it's and had to be called on, like I'm struggling, really struggling, because I probably was a bystander in a situation.
So first, I
And
want to make sure we take care of you. So is this something that you want to take care of? You know, you want to take a moment? You can feel free to step out of the room, get a drink of water, or are you okay to continue the conversation?
I think I'm okay to continue the conversation. Yeah.
So what I'd ask you to do is just to sit with those feelings and think about when you were in that situation, what your body felt like, what your thoughts were, and what you would change or what you would like someone else to change in that moment. And if you were the bystander in that situation, how might you react to
I
shift?
just felt so bad because I didn't offer, looking back at it now and feeling very remorseful to the coworker that I didn't offer help to. And I'm having a hard time wrestling with that.
What I'm hearing from you is a sympathetic response, and I'm wondering if we can move into an empathetic response. And so in those moments, how can we be empathetic to somebody who's going through a challenging time in their, day? If it's something that's, a harassment and they're
Well,
in
it was abusive. I mean, I do feel like it was an abuse of the power that we've been talking about, but I'm feeling really remorseful and guilty because I didn't step in.
So we have policies in place in which we can, work with the HR department to put in claims if that needs to be dealt with. We can also work with individuals if we can talk through the problem and see if we can come up with a resolution. I would love to talk more with you on this individually if this is something that is really resonating with you, because we definitely can work together to create a better culture so that this doesn't continue to happen.
I think that would be really helpful. Again,
Great.
everybody,
I'm
I'm
going
so
to stop
sorry.
you. I'm going to stop you. Great job. All right.
I
I'm
love you.
Thank you
Calms
so
me down.
much. And really deeply, deeply, deeply thanking the six of you for your willingness to be vulnerable and role play. And, this kind of role play, it means you have no idea what's coming, and awesome courage. And thank you. Also, I'm compelled, because this is me and my work, to just name the enormous amount of apologizing that was happening of the three women who were the disruptors, right? And just to name that we do that a lot. And to affirm for you that, outside of your role as trainer, but in any scenario, that when and this is valuable to your training too, when we have something to share, when we have something to say, when we have a feeling or a response and we need to put air to it, we don't need to apologize for that. And in this particular setting, in a training, raising your hand to say something is appropriate. That's like socially appropriate to do that. So I just had to name that, because I don't, it's a commitment I have to myself and my work that I don't let it go when I see it happen. So how'd that feel?
Well, I mean, I just wrote, like, she's just such a calming force. I mean, this woman worked with preschoolers for many, many years. And can you imagine having her as your preschool teacher? Rena, you just I was physically trying to take on the role of being emotionally in a moment, and you literally I couldn't stay there, like someone else was saying before when they were challenged in that. They just wanted to smile, but with Natalie, but that's I just felt like my body literally calming itself down by your voice. So I appreciated that.
So I want to say that all three of you said that. And so what that shows me is back to our EQ grid, right? That as trainers and as facilitators and educators in content that is challenging, I mean, always, but in content that is challenging, we have so much that we can do for ourselves to be able to then show up like that. So that is that on its feet, the three of you maintaining center and groundedness and calm and capacity to be in response. That's your working inside your EQ grid really effectively, right? So I think it's really useful to hear that had an impact for each of the acting participants, and that that's a place to work from and to remember going in, or what are the things that I need to do if I get pushed on, if I get triggered, if something comes up for me. It came up in here, I think the second day, that, you know, we've statistically, most of us have had some kind of bullying or really negative toxic workplace experience in our careers, and we ourselves may get triggered by some of the content. So that was really beautifully done. There's some good stuff in the chat. Moving from sympathy to empathy, beautiful. And remember that that's in our training curriculum when we teach about empathy, moving from sympathy to empathy. Very thoughtful responses, Rena, turning into what was going on for Jamie, figuring out the potential option to address it, but then also moving away from it pretty quickly, right? That's a situation that we really wanna shift pretty quickly, because it could become more emotional, because it could change the whole dynamic of the room. And you did a beautiful job with that, and also using the language of resonate rather than something that's bothering you. I just wanna say that in this specific situation, you mentioned the HR piece. She didn't say where it happened. So it could be that it was something from 3 jobs ago. And I also,
She knows I'm a JCC lifer and a bit.
could
The
be.
fact that we work so closely together, I was like, oh, this is like bizarre and great.
Yeah, it's funny, when I made the teams, I didn't look at who anybody was. I just threw them together.
I wanted to add a couple of things. Donna said it was apparent how reassuring and present Rena was in responding. I also want to name that I love, Jamie, that you put a twist on the, and rather than you being the victim, that you talked about that moment of like, I just realized that I should have been an upstander in this moment and I wasn't, and now I'm having a deep emotional reaction to that. That is very real. And it's something we don't often give time or attention to. And so I love the way you handle that. And I want to say the other thing is to reassure that like things get in the way sometimes because we're having our own reaction to something that we witness. And also, and I think it says this in the manual, like it's actually never too late. It's
Right.
never too
I was
late.
thinking that too, yeah.
Right? And I think it says it somewhere in there, right? It's never
It
too
does.
late
It's in the manual.
to go back to the person who you were, you know, where you witnessed something happening, and to just say it and offer support. It's well, yeah, it's almost never too late unless the person leaves. But.
This one also reminded me again to say how important it is for you to know who you go to with what, right? Because in your, Rena, in your capacity, you know, as a trainer and your role as ECC role, you don't have a designated role to help somebody with something that might be related to HR or policy or procedure. So making sure that you in this role as trainer for your J's are making sure that you don't go, you don't go into your first training until you know, again, what the you can't stop using the word scaffolding, but like what's around you to support you, who you go to, that kind of thing. All right, anything else? Anyone else want to share on this one? Everybody did such a great job. I think this was really helpful. It feels like, yes.
Yeah, a couple of people put in the chat that they thought this was almost and perhaps even more helpful than the teach back, or certainly on par with it, that it, and so that's great for us to know. And I want like ding, ding, ding in a little like, right? So that this is also a way of practicing, right? This is another way that you all can support and practice with each other. Matt, I see you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
I had a quick question. This came up in the scenario, like around the empathy stuff too, about how to figure out, like if somebody's talking, if you're trying to be empathetic towards the person, towards your colleague, how to not put it on them, how to ask for their input on what to do, but not also put it on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is tricky about how to do it, because people can interpret it in different ways. I don't know. I don't think there's an easy solution to it, but I wanted to sort of call it out, and if people had thoughts on it, to hear what people had to say.
Does anyone want to respond?
I'm wondering, Matt, if there's a specific, like if you can flesh the, I hear the question and I'm wondering if there's a concrete example or a way that that's shown up that you can share so we can kind of look at it more closely.
Well, like the scenario that we had in ours was about being asked out on a date and keep saying, or wanting to hook the person up, and the person keeps saying no. And so the idea of like, okay, they've already said no, they don't know what to do, so they turn to the supervisor for help. So now the question is, acknowledging that they've actually tried to say no and do something, they don't know what to do, but before the supervisor, because a lot of us like to be problem solvers, so we'll go in and we'll fix everything, or we'll try to, but also to say, basically like, do you have any idea, like, I'm happy to help you think about this so you're not alone with it, but do you have any ideas, before I, offer some suggestions or something like that. But I don't know if there are other ways to do it, but something that basically says like, you still should have a role in this, even though you might be desperate enough to want to just dump it off and want the supervisor to take care of it.
Emmett.
I see 3 hands, so I see Emmett, Monica, and Miriam.
I just really acknowledge that of like hearing the no and then where do you go from there. And one of my friends, Lawrence, talks about every time there's a boundary of no, there's also a genuine opening. And so figuring out like, what is the opening? Okay, I hear the no here. What might be possible? Where do you feel you have capacity? Do you just want to be in this thinking together? Is there anyone else you want to talk about sharing this with? Like the no, like trusting that no, hearing that no, and then thinking about, well, where is the genuine opening and how do we find that together? That way you're respecting the boundary and brainstorming. That's what I would say. And I know, Andrea, you're keeping stack.
Yeah, so Monica, thank you, Emmett, for that insight. And Monica.
So I think this comes back to exactly what we're doing of the building the culture. So like we do a Tarboot culture orientation here at the J for each and every new staff member. And part of that training is talking about our SRE commitment and letting staff know how they can advocate for themselves and talking about actual scenarios that have happened and, talking it through with them. I'm happy to step in for you, or let's talk about ways that you can respond. So not just saying no, but no, I'm not going on the date with you. It actually makes me really uncomfortable that you keep asking, like help them find their language to really close that door that Emmett was talking about, and like that it can really shut and be concrete and that they can advocate for themselves, knowing that they have a partner. I'm always happy to step in, but me stepping in and taking over doesn't always allow the staff member to feel their power and express their power and own their feelings and put up those boundaries and command the respect that they deserve. So that's the conversation that I have with my team members when it's situations like that, coaching them through how they can own the situation without putting it on them and letting them know that I will walk the line with them, but give them the opportunity to really own that power.
I think that also speaks really to something Donna asked a few days ago about how to help staff advocate for themselves. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Who else had their hand up?
Miriam Pedler.
Emmett and Monica said it more beautifully than I could possibly have. So
thanks, Miriam.
Okay.
So one thing I want to name with that scenario in particular, everything, yes, to everything that everyone said, and that part of your job is also to kind of get a sense of like, sometimes people don't feel they don't feel like there's more that they can do, or that it might feel to them like it's bordering on harassment at this point. And so I think it's keeping that piece in mind, right? And that for each person, that line is different, right? Because they are bringing to that experience of having to say no multiple times to someone who's not getting the message, all of their lived experience up until that point. So for some people, that's like, yeah, I can keep putting my foot down, whatever. And for some people who've had different lived experiences and are coming to that out of an abusive situation or out of not knowing how to say no, they're bringing a different, they're bringing it, they live it differently. And so that's also a piece of like, without probing, to like give them a space to say like, how, you know, as I think someone said, how best can I support you in this space? Right. And let them share. Nicole.
I'm done.
Okay. So we have a number of questions in the parking lot. And what we'd like to do now is we want to just take a break until 10 past the hour. And when we come back, we're going to do the final piece of the curriculum, which is closing into action, which we're going to actually do live with you. Actually, I take that back. We're probably going to answer the questions in the bike rack, and then we're going to do that piece. So please be back at 10 past.
Andrea and Nicole, can I just put something in the chat that I want to ask about as a question?
Absolutely.
To either of you, I guess.
Marilyn, I think that one answers some of what you and I were going back and forth about too.
Oh,
you're muted.
Did you already put it in?
No, but I'm wondering if the answer.
Yeah, we didn't get it, Marilyn. Sometimes if Matt's the last person that you were chatting directly to, it might have gone to him rather than Nicole or I.
No, I was in the process of formulating it.
Oh, wonderful.
No, what I was just saying to you, Marilyn, was just whether that answered the question a little bit. It didn't answer completely the scenario you and I were talking about.
With the last one about how can I help you?
Yeah.
You
I mean,
think?
it's related, but ask it I mean, if you feel like doing, then ask it anyway.
No dumb questions. Ask all the questions.
I was more asking you whether it did, not that you shouldn't do the other. So go for it.
So Nicole, I have 3.
I'm just chatting you the 2 that I have.
Okay.
Do you have different ones?
Yeah, I'm sending you another one.
Okay.
And then Marilyn just sent one.
Yeah, is that clear enough? I guess.
Yeah.
Can you send it to me?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Great. So I don't know that these are meaty. These are meaty and I'm just aware of time. That's all.
Yeah. So I think that the one that Marilyn just sent us is a really important one. I think that the one about what to do when emotions are high, like my question is like, so one of the ways we can do this is to say like, we have a bunch of questions in the parking lot. And we know some of them don't have clear answers from what we've discussed, and some of them may have. So like, we're going to read questions, and like, if I mean, right, because I feel like the question about like, what do you do when emotions are high on both sides? I feel like we've actually touched on that in a couple different ways. I don't know. I need to pee.
That's an easy parking.
Also pause the recording.
Oh gosh.
Whatever. Key takeaway, one major takeaway, and I'm hoping that you have 50 major takeaways, but just pick one that right now feels really alive for you. One major takeaway from this training. And Andrew will read them out for us as they come in.
Empathy, kindness is transformational. Needs lots of prep. It's hard work, but we've got this. So necessary.
Okay, I'm going to add one and you can answer either. Another thing, go ahead.
The importance of moving from direct supervisor responses to a coaching response. This is a process. It won't happen all at once. A psychologically safe space is a better space. Solidifying the environment everyone talks about wanting to be part of. Building culture takes time, but is transformational. Creating psychologically safe spaces is sacred work. Now could be the moment. Help everyone to get to now. Feedback is an antidote to incivility. Now could be the moment, and a couple more people, now could be the moment. Help everyone to get to now. Learning is continuous, and we can all learn from one another, even in uncomfortable moments. Thank you, Christine. I love that. Genuine empathy is a requirement. Lack of empathy is toxic and rude. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Thank you. Yeah. So now we have go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, that just fills me up so much. I'm like, you're taking away the things we are laying down. Okay, and so now let's share one intention for action. And this could be something that you are intending as a facilitator and trainer to do vis-a-vis the training, or it could just be something like, I will start saying hello to everybody on my way into I don't know, whatever. It could be something related to you as the professional and an intention you have from learning this work, or you as the trainer and an intention you have about bringing this work forward. Either one. Hit it.
You're taking a moment to think about that. I'm just reading. We have Emmett put in empathy requires action and great guidance on how to respond to requests for confidentiality and how to handle it. And yeah, so now we're getting some of the responses of one intention for action. I will figure out a way to bring this work to my community. Thank you. My intention is to be an active and present bystander with empathy. And then we have policy review. Yeah, want to sit down with our policies and review what we have. Thanks. Not only will I bring this to my community, there are lots of tidbits that will make me a better leader. Thank you, Denise. I want to be more intentional in spending time with my staff one-on-one and having conversations with them. And Miriam, all of it. Yeah, during training, allow for silence. Yeah, be more purposeful in identifying when I am distracted and clearing the space to be fully present. Thank you. Making this work personal to me and then bringing it back to our leadership and JCC employees. I like looking at giving feedback. It's helpful because we care about our staff and want them to grow. Putting myself in the shoes of others first and continuing to make time for that. Thank you. We'll determine with my teammates how to deliver this effectively. Great.
So thank you so much. And really want to just offer you a space to kind of take those in to see how much was gleaned from our time together and how much it's already starting to make internal shifts for each of you. And we certainly are very excited to to hear how things go moving forward. So this is a reminder that
one last one that I think is really Marilyn wrote, turning uncomfortable into comfortable. Yeah, love that. And the willingness to sit in the discomfort until it starts to ease.
Taking you all the way back to those very early slides that talks about what this training is and what it isn't. And that largely what it is about creating the conversations, having difficult conversations, opening up tools and tactics. And it's not about solving all the problems. So this is a reminder to you as to this training's participants, but also you'll bring it into your training just to help your colleagues know that Ta'amot exists, that we are a resource center for organizations and individual professionals around issues of workplace culture, organizational culture, and harassment and abuse. And if you like, I've given you a slide to share our values. It's just a piece of resource for you, but important to make sure that people know who we are and how to reach us, and that we are a resource to you as the JCC as a whole. We exist for all Jewish organizations and all Jewish professionals. And finally, to close us out, the reminder that from Jewish tradition, the sentence is Lo lecha hamacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin l'chipa le'al mimena. It is not on you to complete the work, neither are you free to desist from it. This is big work. This is the work of systemic change, of internal shift, of external shift, of unearthing, of excavation and rebuild. It is deep and it's real, and it can feel really overwhelming. And I'm not just speaking to you as the people who are going to be holding this work. That's even more of a lift, but just for participants sitting in this training and being asked to think in these ways and to work on these skills, it's a lot. So we want to name that and hold it and remember that it is a core Jewish value and Jewish tradition that we are not commanded to complete all of the work, but it is our job. Just like we talked about at the very beginning, we must not remain indifferent. It is our job to pick up our piece to do the part of it. Rebecca, I will be happy to teach you how to say it in Hebrew. All right, so that has completed the entirety of the training content, which is so exciting. Mazel tov to all of us. Congratulations to all of us. And we're gonna move on. I don't know where we are in our agenda. So Andrea, can you pick up?
Yeah, I am happy to pick up and just, take another minute to like breathe into this moment that we have come to the end of this training. We have spent 18 hours together. It has been a lot. You have been amazing in your intention, in your creativity, in your everything. And it's been a pleasure. So where we are in our, because we'll have time for all of this in the Siyum, but where we are in this is we're going to come back to the questions that are in the bike rack. And I think what we should do is we're going to invite for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to address these questions and then also address questions that you have around okay, that's great. Now what, right? So brainstorming with you around what does it look like? How can we support you to take those steps forward in bringing in the training? And I want to start. So I'm going to just start with reading out the questions from the bike rack. And if it's your question and you're like, oh no, we already answered that, you feel free to jump in and say got it. We have the answer.
A reminder that we want to hear everyone's answers to these questions, not just ours.
Yeah. So the first question is how to create safe spaces when we have new key staff members who haven't built relationships of trust yet and are the people who are nonetheless the ones doing the check-ins. In other words, how do we deal with all of a sudden I've got a lot of new mid-level managers and the staff has remained the same, but the mid-level folks are different. and they're tasked with something that requires trust. So I'm curious to hear what are folks' ideas around, like, how do you do that? What kind of support do the different people need in order to address that? What are some ideas that folks have?
So I would like to chime in this case. I think it's so important that whenever you have a brand new manager, that first of you actually teach them some of the stuff over here, how to give feedback and how to receive feedback so that people have the basic skills as to how to manage. But then you should also encourage your new managers to build those relationships through one-on-ones or through some rather formal structure, because sometimes we get so busy, we don't just pass each other like ships in the night. So that has to be really important, where your new manager really gets their subordinate team and says, listen, going forward, we're going to do A, B, C, and every week I'm going to meet with each one of you for half an hour. I don't say that I take that advice, but I try.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of, like, what's a formal process, right? One-to-ones are great when you've got new people coming in to, like, say, great, over the next X number period of time, I'd like you to have one-to-ones with all your direct reports, right? And that's part of the work. Molly.
Yeah, I think yes to that, and I think that that's part of a strong onboarding process, where you're giving the managers the tools that they need so that they understand how the agency operates. And then during that time, figuring out a way to take the concerns of the people who work within that manager's purview and guiding those people to go to that manager and empowering that manager. I think sometimes we can be tempted to take things off the plate of the manager, which can undermine the manager. So finding a way to empower that manager through giving them the knowledge of the agency, the resources they need to do the job, and referring the people who work under them to that manager, saying, no, that person is the person who can answer that question for you, and give it back to them.
Thanks, Molly. Other folks, other ideas about how to navigate that?
One of the ideas that I am noodling is operating on two parallel tracks. One is more systemic, long-term, will take time track, and one is a much more tactical, near-term that will allow the two parallel processes to converge. The whole question about having the right onboarding policies, the right employee performance policies, that is ongoing and incredibly important work to do. It's also a very heavy lift, and things are very dynamic in JCCs, and it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back before you actually get to where you need to go. So continue to focus on that, but simultaneously break it down into much smaller chunks. Where are the departments where it is perhaps less healthy or less vibrant, where having these conversations may have the greatest impact, or identify the natural ringleaders that you have in your organizations, whether that's organizational power or whether it is just sort of the influential power that they have, and work with them to extend the circle of influence and have it happen in a more concentric, iterative way, because to approach it as one strategy for everyone at the same time, it feels a little bit like Sisyphus trying to get that boulder up to the top of the mountain.
Thank you, everybody. And the thing I wanted to also add is it's also okay to name it, right? To name the awkwardness and the uncomfortableness, to name it for the new manager, and even perhaps to name it for the employees. Like, we understand. And I think perhaps that's a little bit about those parallel tracks, Miriam, that you were just talking about, like how to hold the both and in that space. So Lori, do you feel complete, or at least have some direction in response to your question?
I think what Miriam said really resonated, which is, I asked the question because we have a new early childhood director, and Jen and I both have acted as the interim in between. And so we had to build this trust and relationship with all of our early learning center staff. And now we have the new director, but there's some of the staff members are still coming to us because we have the trust, and how to hand that back off. We're starting to, but it's challenging and long. It's not just, okay, now she's it, goodbye. So, I think what Miriam said, which is it's not the same, it's not the same as membership director who oversees the front desk staff. Like, it's just every department head is different.
I'm wondering if there's a place there for there to be a transition model where if somebody comes to you, you are there to fully support them, but the new ECC director also needs to be involved. And so it's like shadowing, right? When somebody's learning a new, at a restaurant, right? And to say, like, we're here for you. We're always going to be here for you. And you can always come to us alone. And part of trusting us is that we hire, we trust this new hire, and it's really her job. And so could you have spaces where people can they can come to you, but she has to also be, the director also has to be involved for a little while.
Yeah.
I like that.
Can we move on?
Yeah, so I'm going to invite us to move on. And the next question, I'm actually going to read two because they're, well, actually, no, they're not related. So the next question that we had was what Miriam Chilton raised, right? That empathy is connected to emotions, and how do we make these practices that we're teaching accessible to everyone, recognizing that we are diverse in our neurotypes, and how we can show up in spaces. And so how do we support when you all are teaching that piece of it, and also like setting expectations, how do you do it in a way that acknowledges that? So I'm going to say what I often say and what Nicole often says, which is one thing is to kind of just name, like, we are all coming, we are a neurodivergent group. And that means that how we relate to and give emotional cues is going to be very different in how we receive them. And someone actually said, and I think it was Rena, but I'm not positive, said that we can differentiate between the acknowledgement of the emotions that someone else is feeling and feeling with them at the same time, right? So what's important is that someone feels heard. What's important is that people can reflect back. What I hear you saying is that you are feeling X. I'm noticing that you Y. Or thank you for sharing this. Can you, right? So we're naming the feelings that they have named, right? Teaching people to like mirror back in a way that helps the person feel heard. The other thing I want to offer, and then I would like to open this up to folks, is that sometimes we're not the right person. So when I used to train for Keshet, and I would talk about receiving a student coming to you and coming out, right? And I would do this in day schools where there were people who taught in the day schools who were came from a perspective of like, this is not okay with me halachically, and I can't pretend that it is, right? And so what I would often coach those people to say is, thank you so much for sharing this with me. It is so important that you have this. Can we go together to so-and-so, because I think they're going to be able to support you better than I can, right? Which is a vulnerable thing to do, but sometimes it's a really important thing to do, to say like, I can't hold this for you for whatever reason, not those words, but like, I'm not the right person. Let me support you. I want to thank you for coming to me. Now let's find the right person, and I'll go with you, right? I'll be there with you, because they're probably coming to you because of the relationship. And so that's also about helping people to understand what their own limitations are. So that's my thought. Nicole, it looks like you have something you want to add, and then we want to, if other people have thoughts.
No, we can hear from other people.
Yeah.
Can I add to what you said based off of the bystander thing that Jamie and I did? I think like offering the space of like, you know, how can I show up best in this moment for you? And then allowing that person to tell you what they need without like trying to investigate what their needs are, because we're also neurodivergent, and not everyone is, you know, shows empathy or emotion in the same way. And so instead of trying to like mind read, like we said we can't do, giving that authority to be like, you know, like giving the agency back to that person and saying, how can I show up best for you in this moment? And if you can't, then being like, I'd like to, if you're okay with this, I'd like to find someone who can better address these needs. And I'm happy to go with you, but I feel like I might not be the right person to do this right now.
Yeah, that's great, Rena. I love that. Yes, very much so. I saw Jen Ross.
Sometimes it also depends on what kind of background baggage you have with the individual. I've had times I've stepped away from a certain situation because I know I'm not the best person at that time to meet with that person. Likewise, there's times I've said, you know what, I think I should speak with that person because it's not a problem for me. And that really makes a huge difference. It's much easier to be empathetic and open and curious when you're not already like really frustrated with the situation or the person.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for naming that, Jen. Other folks, other thoughts about how to handle this or how to teach it? Because I think it was also about like, how do we support people to have the skills if it doesn't come naturally to them, like the base, like, and how to teach this unit. So other thoughts or suggestions?
So one of the thoughts I had that I think comes back to what Matt was talking before of like, how do you give them the agency like Rena's discussing without pushing it back on them? And so sometimes it is showing up as your whole self and saying like, here are the 3 things that I'm capable of doing for you, right? Like I can make space to talk,
that's
I
great.
can give you a hug, or I can walk away. This is what I am able to give you. Now you can tell me, like Rena was saying, what can I do for you? But this is my capacity. And so I think that's just another tool as well.
Great, I love that, Monica. My one caveat to what you said is to be mindful if I'm a supervisor, that offering a hug to someone who is subordinate to you can feel like they have to say yes to that. So that's my only, right? Like, yes, absolutely. And in those power imbalanced relationships, that's something we have to be mindful of. It's definitely something, as a very touchy person, I have really had to take on and challenge myself not to put my hand on someone's shoulder when I see them in distress. That's what I need when I'm in distress. And I've had to learn how to ask for it. And I also need to recognize, like, I need to ask, like, would it be okay? Are you comfortable with? And if there's a power differential, sometimes I just breathe and notice what I want to do. Yeah, and so much of this work requires checking in and knowing our own capacities, which are constantly changing. Thank you, Emmett, for that comment. Anyone else? And if not, we're going to move on to another question. Okay, Nicole, do you want to take?
I don't have them up in front of me because they're in the chat now.
Okay, I will pull it up. So this question was, how do you handle a situation when an employee has a complaint about a supervisor, but doesn't want to speak directly with that person, meaning the person that they have the complaint about, or even have their name mentioned? So I think the situation is, I have a complaint. The complaint is about my supervisor. Or a supervisor, right? I don't want to talk directly to the person who I have the complaint about. And when you talk to them, I don't want you to mention my name. Am I getting that correct, Marilyn? That's kind of the situation. Great. So what are people's thoughts about this?
So I'm going to interject with the first thought about it is that what the complaint is matters dramatically here, because if it is something that rises to the level of unlawful harassment, you're ostensibly being asked for confidentiality, which you can't promise. So it's, that may not be the first step to how to respond to this person in the moment, but just for your own back mind awareness that there's a big difference between, I don't like the way this person is, like, I don't like their tone and facial expressions in meetings versus something that could rise to the level of unlawful.
Or even like this person is consistently interrupting me, and so I don't think it's going to be even remotely effective for me to try and give them feedback, and it really irritates me and I feel shut down, is very different than I feel threatened by this person. They keep whatever, some kind of
keep staring at me and looking at me funny.
And so, right, to be mindful of like what the issue is around the confidentiality piece. But there's another piece to that question around like, what do you do if someone comes to you to report something and of whatever nature, right? So let's assume it's not a harassment situation and they're just really uncomfortable and they don't want to speak to the person directly. How might you navigate that? What are some folks' ideas about this?
Christine?
I think what I usually do is try to, obviously hear the person out and just really hear them and be in that moment, but then also kind of put it back on them a little bit. It's just asking questions as far as, what they would like to see happen, or, you're coming to me, I'm glad you did, kind of thing. What is your hope? What do you think? What do you hope comes out of this conversation? You've asked me not to speak directly with so-and-so. What can I do to help you, or what can we do together to improve the situation? So I kind of usually just kind of ask a lot of questions about like, what are they really looking for? Like, why did they come to me? In other words, not so directly like that, but like, why did they come to me and what are they looking for out of the conversation, so that I know better kind of how to steer it and what the next step should be.
Jen? Thanks, Christine.
Can I add to what Christine said a little bit?
Yeah, Jen had her hand up, so
Okay.
we're going to let her go, but there we go. Okay.
If it is something persistent, like the example you provided, like they keep interrupting during meetings and things like that, perhaps there's an opportunity to observe, like say, hey, I'd like to come to one of your team meetings. So then you can witness it and then speak to the supervisor directly about what you've observed and coach them.
Great. Who actually said, can I add to that? I didn't realize, I didn't know who it was.
It was Rena.
Okay, so Molly and then Rena.
I think that this is a situation where having a strong partnership with other leaders can be really helpful, where you can, like Christine was saying, hear them, make sure that they feel that they've made their case, and then take an opportunity to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to find out what I can do and come back to you. And then you have the opportunity to talk to other people who you whose opinions you trust to try and problem solve, because situationally, depending on what the specific concern is, it's a good thing to have somebody trusted who you feel can help you to navigate that.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. There was someone else who wanted to, Rena, go ahead.
I was just going to add that maybe I always come back to, I was about to text Jamie this, but coming back to like the early childhood space of like, because a lot of what we're talking about resonates with me in the sense of like big people, big problems, little children, little problems type of situations. And so when we're talking to children and we phrase what our responsibilities are in those situations, like my job is to keep you safe and to keep us, it kind of like reframing your responsibilities in that situation. Would it be effective to say like, my responsibilities are to keep you safe in this situation. What can we do to work through this? How can I be most helpful to you in the situation?
Thanks, Rena. I see Miriam's hand and Miriam Chilton's hand, and I am also conscious of the time. So here's what I want to offer. Miriam, if you want to kind of quickly add your comment, and then we're going to move on to open it up for questions about implementation.
I'll pass.
Thank you. You can always also offer things in the chat. What I want to say is that I think it's, I love all those suggestions. And the one, and to just reiterate, like finding opportunities for you to observe the behavior, if it's possible, yourself is one way of navigating that, which was already named. And I think it can be a really powerful one, and or someone else. So those were both named. So let's want to open it up to just, we know that there are questions about implementation. There are questions about how do we bring this back? And we have a limited amount of time. And just so you know, we're here. The JCCA staff is here, and Nicole and I are here. Part of this is going to give you opportunities to meet with us. We are also accessible by email. And so we want you to know that. We want you to know that you're going to have, I can't remember, you will have coaching. You will have my availability as a coach, each JCC individually, to meet with your team to kind of think through those things, or maybe afterwards to debrief the first time you do it. But let's take a few moments now and just want to hear, like, what questions are arising for you? And I want to acknowledge there was one last question in the bike rack that we did not get to, and we will just kind of send out some responses to that and invite you to engage with it. So Monica, is there an expected launch date to roll this out to our staff? When will pods begin, and what exactly will be covered in those sessions? So I can't answer the second part of the question. I can answer the first part of the question, which is that our hope is that by the, what did we say? Nicole, do you remember what we said about our expectation about, I think our hope was that you would get by January, you would have a plan.
Right. Yes.
And begin to start calendaring what that might look like.
Right. And that the trainings must happen by the end of April.
That they must all happen, or they must get started?
Yeah, started.
Yeah.
Not all. So if for those of you that have a huge staff and you might be doing this in multiple cohorts, we want a plan in place by January with dates that start no later than April.
Jamie.
I mean, I have a lot of questions swirling in my head, but the first one, and this is probably silly, but we all have these manuals in our possession. And we've used them as a guide throughout this whole training. Our staff that we're training, are we to make copies of this to give them some documentation? Yeah. They just come in with a pen and a pencil and a notepad?
Yes. So your materials are your binder, the deck, the slide deck, and the handouts that they will have to also get. So everybody gets their handouts. And then what I had mentioned at the beginning of you would not remember, that the way that we printed up those slides with a place to annotate, some trainers like to use those, or, if you're worried about paper, you could make a few copies in case some people might like them. But other than that, they just, what?
But they get handouts, one through whatever. That's what they get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll get the handouts, but I think what Nicole's saying is, like, some people might also print out like the 3 slides per thing with some places for notes, so that it's just helps jog people's memories, because it's a lot to hold and you want them to have something other than just the handouts sometimes. Miriam, your hand is up, and I'm not sure if it's up from before or if you have, but I imagine maybe this is an opportunity for you to ask a question, unless you didn't mean it for it to be up.
Okay, it went down. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi.
I wanted to jump in here just to answer the final part of Monica's question about the learning pods. So Joy, Mark, and myself are going to be reaching out to our learning pods in the coming days, I think by Thursday or Friday latest, to actually schedule those for the coming months. So they're going to be on your calendar. You'll have that time set aside. It's going to be 45 to 60 minutes following those scheduled webinars. It's a time for us to reflect, dive deeper into the process, and also check in about how you're doing as a team and with your trainings. I'll send you a more detailed email about this. Our next full group meeting is going to be on December 2nd, and then we're actually going to break out into learning pods from that. But you'll be receiving an email with that information, as well as our feedback response survey, which I'm actually going to throw into the chat right now. Do not feel compelled to do anything about that. Because you're also going to be getting that in an email later today or early tomorrow, depending on when I get home. And please just take a few minutes to give your feedback for this training. The evaluation and survey is super helpful, both to Andrea and Nicole, as well as Joy, Mark, and myself. So I know that was a lot of information, but information about learning pods and webinars are coming. Don't worry, we're not keeping anything from you.
Yeah, so you will get all of everything that Yael just said will also go out in an email. Molly, I see you're unmuted. I didn't know if that meant you had a question or no, you're just unmuted. All right, so other questions, or we have time for really like one more question about anything really, implementation, taking it back, or something that came up in the training that is still burning for you.
Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is actually about the material. Do we have permission to condense certain sections, or should we be following the text like all the way through, or can we do like, if we feel like some of this text will be valuable for this group and some will be like, some scenarios may not be as valuable for this group, can we play with it in that way?
Say more about what you mean by condense. Like, you certainly don't need to read the manual as it stands. You can certainly condense, summarize, paraphrase, but I feel like that's not quite what you're asking.
Yes, and just like how you gave us 2 sections, like you gave us those 2 sections for our teach back,
right,
and said teach 25 minutes of this. Can we like do that for each section, like pick 25 minutes, or should we lean more into like just making it our own and like not reading it word for word, but getting at the essence of what it is?
The second thing you said.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it builds on itself pretty intentionally, and you know, I think it's important to hold all the content. Miriam has a question in the chat. I love this question about whether there's a certification process to know if the participants retain the information. So no, and we talk about this a lot, and we're thinking about this a lot, and kind of how we continue to build out systems that are going to put some benchmarking and accountability on the information. And I think, you know, as you're committing as JCCs to this work in an ongoing and systemic way, the JCC Association, the JCulture Initiative, and we intend to be here to help, to like on our feet, keep building out ways to do accountability checking and benchmarking, and continue to grow the work.
And we also, and Tara, I see your hand. We also pointed at the very beginning of the training that there are some really good tools out there. So Leading Edge has a tool, and some other folks have tools out there that can, you know, you think about like taking the pulse or the temperature of the organization. And we can also talk in the coaching sessions about like, what are some things that you want to see shift? And I like doing that, right? Like, here are 3 things based on this training that I'd like to see shift in our organizational culture. And then what resources do I and our teams need? And resources includes people. What support do the folks who are leading this need from me and from the institution, right? And then what's a reasonable, and I'm going to say that again, what is a reasonable time frame? And how am I going to know, like, what's going to be different? How am I going to, what am I going to see that's different? What am I going to hear that's different? What am I going to feel that's different, right? Those kinds of questions can be your own way of moving it forward in combination with those kinds of things. Tara.
I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to try to be brief with this, but this training seems like it's kind of fluid for you. Like as you go through and teach this more, it seems like, you know, saying, yeah, I just sent you the updated slide deck and making changes in the training manual. Is that something as you make changes that will be sent out to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That was very fast. So we are at the end of our time. And we want to invite you into just a moment of intent, of kind of mindfulness and noticing a Hineni moment with each other. And so our invitation.
Andrea, I hate to stop you before the invitation. I just remembered we need to just go to Yael for one moment of business. And I don't want to I don't want it to then jar our mindfulness moment. So Yael, super quick.
I think I actually covered the business. So back to Andrea.
Okay. And the evaluation piece and all of that. Great.
Yes. So the evaluation I threw into the chat, and you're also going to be getting an email later this afternoon with the link. So if you didn't capture it, don't worry.
Sorry. I think I missed a piece of it then.
No worries.
Back to you, Andrea. Sorry.
All right. No, it's fine. It's great. I just want to, before we close, Miriam named that there's measuring culture, and then there's did people retain the actual knowledge of what is or isn't appropriate? So want to tell you that Mode has a kind of what have you learned evaluation form that we can share with you, that you can, and we will be sharing with you, that you can send out to your teams. And particularly around the harassment, it's about revisiting it. Right? It's about making sure that there is the signage by itself is not going to be enough, but what's in our policies? How often are we reviewing our policies? How much of this is explicit in our policies anyway? So it's going to get reviewed, right? Because there's ways of kind of testing the knowledge and then kind of revisiting to see what people have retained. Okay. So everybody, I'm going to invite you to just take a deep breath. You can stretch. Maybe roll your neck, roll your shoulders. And if we were in person, what I would invite us to do is to stand in a circle. But we're not. But imagine that we're all standing in a circle. And your invitation is to put something into this container that we're making of this circle, this container that we've had something into this circle that you are offering of yourself to this community in order to hold this. And then something that you're taking with you. So we're not in person, and we have 4 minutes left to do that. So my invitation to you is, I'd love to hear 3 people unmute, and I invite everyone else to kind of share in the chat. What's something that you want to put into the container of this group to be able to hold with you? And what's something that you're taking? And I'd love to invite 3 people to raise their hands, maybe folks we haven't heard from very much or at all over the last few days, to raise your hand and offer something to our group. So I'm going to read the things that are, okay, Christine, thank you.
Okay, I'll give it a go. I'm taking with me one, a real sense of community, and that we're really all in this together, and we're really going through a lot of similar things together and at the same time. And yeah, so just overall sense of community.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Someone else, what's something that you're putting into the container and something that you might be taking away, or one or the other? And there's some beautiful things in the chat, which I think I'm going to have to see. Anyone else? So I'm gonna just go. Feel free to jump in, but I'm gonna read what we have in the chat. So what I see is offering humility and taking with me grace. Putting in trust that you all have this and your communities are blessed to have you, from Nicole. Putting in I am inspired. I am inspired by, taking away a reminder to lead with empathy and listening. Knowing I am a part of this group doing this sacred and important work. Sending gratitude to you all who are on this journey with us and your communities. That's from Joy. Offering friendship and support and taking knowledge. Offering guidance, taking friends and colleagues. Offering continued commitment to this work, taking inspiration. Putting in appreciation for the time, taking out thoughtfulness. Continuing collaboration on best practices for sharing this information. Putting in support and taking friends. Thoroughly enjoyed learning and growing with you all. Feel blessed that you, Nicole, Emmett, JCCA for all that we offered. Thank you. Offering shared experience, taking with me motivation. And then someone said, and then offering collegiality and connection and taking with me the reminder that we don't have to do all the work. We just have to continue to take steps. Exactly. Putting in appreciation, taking away community, putting in appreciation, taking community and friendship, humbly offering support, taking inspiration, support, putting in support, taking away the ability to be brave, offering, I am here, I am taking strength from the group, and then thanking us for helping to transform you and your JCC. So thank you. Thank you. It's been such an honor and a real pleasure. So give yourselves a big pat on the back, a big clap, like you made it, you did it, you are amazing. Nicole, I turn it over to you to close us out.
Let's just do our one word whip. We got to do it to close. So I'm just going to call. Everybody get ready to unmute. Christine, Jamie, Matt.
Sorry. Relieved.
Little emotional, but a little emotional.
Powerful.
Andrea, Natalie, Rena.
Inspired.
Thankful.
Also emotional.
Lori, Julia, Rebecca.
Excited. I'm gonna also say emotional.
Motivated.
Alexandra, Miriam Pedler, Marilyn.
Grateful.
Enveloped.
I have to say grateful too.
Donna, Molly, Angela.
Inspired.
Eager.
Exhausted.
Ali, Sheila, Yael.
Appreciative.
Also grateful.
Full.
Lauren, Mallory, Tara.
Overcome.
I'll echo another grateful.
Energized.
Joy, Amet, Monica.
Inspired.
Full.
Seen.
Robin, Denise, Kai.
Ready?
inspired to share.
Grateful.
Jen had to leave, but she said excited. And my word is also energized. We want to thank you so much for all that you put into this time with us, and we look forward to hearing how it goes. And we're here. We are not walking away. Be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone.